Any unfinished business, members of council? Yep, go ahead.
If we could, and maybe I should have asked before when Chief Crowder was up there, can we get a little more info on the declaration of the emergency and what we collectively, well, Chief Crowder, yourself, CEO, what we are expecting to have happen? I know it didn't come to a vote to go into the declaration of emergency, but we certainly agree that these things need to proceed as our experts recommend. So if we could just get, is that okay to ask it at this point in time?
New business, yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
Chief?
I thought this might come tonight. So I'm just trying to log in, just so I have some documents just in case anybody asks and I can reflect back to it. While that's warming up. So the declaration was a recommendation by myself to the warden and to CEO Mike Galloway. Last week, Wednesday, we went into Code Black for roughly 3 hours. It started around 3:45 in the afternoon. We had no ambulances and we had to rely on both tiered response and our partners to the east. But what the problem happened is it quickly realized Chatham-Kent had no ambulances to respond. And after further investigation within the 3 hours, London-Middlesex had no ambulances to respond. At one point, Lambton, Elgin, London-Middlesex, County of Essex, and Chatham-Kent had no ambulances. And as stuff kind of morphed and flowed, we did gain more, but then we lost more. And basically all of southwestern Ontario didn't have the resource. We got through it. We got back to normal. It took probably 8 hours to get back to normal. And when we get into that situation, calls have to get queued. We had reports from Windsor Fire that did some tiered response for us, that they got updated that they were dealing with an unconscious person downtown Windsor, and the closest ambulance was Thamesville. So it was at that time that I developed a report and it went to the warden and to the CAO, and the recommendation by myself, which was hard, was to declare. It's a hard decision, puts a lot of weight, but it's needed because it has to come to the forefront. Sorry.
Yeah, just take your time, Bruce, because I know as part of the decision-making process, it was painstaking, and the weekend was filled with lots of discussions, lots of pros and cons, looking at all the variables, looking at the statistics, looking at all the available data, and as I think most members of council know, a lot of that pressure sits usually at the feet, essentially, of our emergency service heads, whoever they may be, fire, police, EMS. In all of our communities, we have most of you have fire departments, volunteer mainly in the county at least, but yeah, those decisions, and having been around for 25 plus years and having been part of many of the decisions to declare emergencies, they are never easy. When you have sort of a situation that is, you know, example is a number of years ago, we had to declare emergency as it related to a gas explosion that basically leveled an entire subdivision. Well, that decision is very easy. It's just automatic. But when you've got something, an issue like this that has been going on for many, many months, and it is increasing in intensity and increasing in intensity, there has to come, there's a breaking point, right? And that falls at the desk of the chief in whatever emergency services. So as you can tell, Chief Crowder has put a lot of thought, and it does not enter any of these things and in my experience with dealing with chiefs that have reported to me over the years, he has demonstrated such a calm and very straightforward rationale and thinking process, but as you can see, it weighs on any individual that has to ultimately make that decision. So if you wanted to maybe continue from there, Chief, or
Yeah,
Morgan?
just to add to it as well, is that when initially when the CAO called and the chief and that, it started pretty much, you know, on early Saturday and right up till Sunday and Sunday night, and the reality is, when I heard what happened on Wednesday, when the closest ambulance to you is about 2.5 hours away, and that's pretty scary in that regard. So with 400,000 people, and these events are happening before we even have the crisis of the flu season upon us, and now we're hearing about COVID going up. And then our hospitals are at 106, 107, 130% capacity, and no place to put them, and so forth. I give a lot of credence to the chief. He had a lot of really great suggestions, but the only way you can administer those is to make sure that all of the stakeholders are in the room and having a conversation on how it can be done. That's what we did. We did, you know, a level below, and it was basically for the region, because obviously, you know, Middlesex and Elgin, the rest of them, you know, they have to take care of themselves, you know, certainly in that regards. But that was really, I think, the fact that, if you recall, when we were at AMO, we had a delegation meeting with the ministry. We did put forward some ideas in terms of what we thought would be conducive to reducing or mitigating some of those calls. And let's face it, it was slow coming in that regards. The intent was not to, you know, embarrass anybody. The intent was the greater good and of our citizens in the community, and that's the hard part too, is to make that declaration, is that you don't want to start a panic, you know, within the community. But in the same token, sometimes you have to bring it to a high level of attention so that we can find resolutions. We had a good meeting this morning with the minister and the local MPPs, as I alluded in my remarks earlier on. And having that meeting, you know, and starting that afternoon of the declaration, 11 points were brought forward. Some really good points. Some of it can be administered very quickly, as the minister said. But some of it, the ministers or the ministry has to give us the go-ahead in order for us to do it. And I think there's an opportunity here that some of those suggestions will be implemented fairly quickly in order for us to mitigate these problems. And you know, I had a London reporter called today and did an interview and said, well, you know, why don't we just buy more ambulances, or do we need more ambulances? You know, is you're short staffed and so forth? And I said, if we were to buy more ambulances, we'd have to expand the parking lots of the hospitals, because that's not the issue. It's a whole host of things. It's like a domino. If any one of them falls, something will cause a reaction someplace else. So that's why kudos to the chief. Let's get everybody in the room and really start putting our heads together and finding some solution. And really, this is, for many of us around this table, we've been here a long time, and this is nothing new. We've talked about this way back, but the severity of it is getting certainly worse. So what I think it's going to take and through the efforts of the chief, is that we need to start thinking outside the box. It's not like just a matter of moving one thing and sliding this here and so forth. It's really start thinking outside the box. In other areas of healthcare, whether it's having more input from public health, maybe seconding some of their people. I think, Chief, the hospice, there's hospice has beds. If they're not using them, can we use that to offload? There's, Hotel Dieu Grace, mental health. If those beds are not filled, is there opportunities on some of the not so acute cases but need some care? Is that an opportunity? Engaging the private sector for transport, does that make some sense at some point? So the chief, kudos to you, to chair this and bring those comments forward and that, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take the will, and for people are looking at us around the horseshoe here to make sure that we give them the tools in the toolbox to mitigate some of these issues. That's why I think it's important for us support our and we have, for the last 2.5, 3 years, has been really hard on our first responders, all of them, police, fire, EMS, and for many around the table. You've gotten the calls, and it has been pleasant, and so forth. So we've got to show them that we're going to work, we're going to fix this thing one way or another, and it's going to take the province, it's going to take all of our efforts in order for us to mitigate this issue. Chief?
Yeah, sorry about that, but it is personal. I want to make something perfectly clear to everybody. We're not throwing darts, we're not pointing fingers, and we're not laying blame. That kind of came out this week, that we may have been blaming the hospitals. It's not a solely hospital issue, and that is not my intent, to lay blame at the hospitals, because it's not. We've been working extremely hard with the hospitals, Windsor Regional, Erie Shores, and Hotel Dieu Grace, on those mitigation strategies that I talked about in the report earlier. They've been great partners. Unfortunately, we met the breaking point. But to answer your question, Mayor McDonald, what have we been doing? Once we declared on Monday, we got the community control group together, and it was quite large. It started out with roughly 50 members, and all of your municipalities were represented with the CEMCs or fire chiefs or police services. We have the hospitals, we have public health unit, dispatch. We had, or we have membership from the ADM's office, Ontario Health. We have everybody, Windsor Regional, Erie Shores, all the normal players. In the first meeting, it was discussed as what the situation is and get that landscape. And we discussed that, and it was quite frank of what happened. Today's meeting, Tuesday we met, and we shortened the list of the membership, still inviting others, like your representatives, but if there was no real input, it's a matter of time management. We don't really want them there. It's to see what we can get done. Yesterday's meeting involved, okay, what tasks could be assigned and what ideas could be made. We had a really good discussion at that one, and then today, as the warden spoke of, we've assigned 12 tasks ranging from very low-hanging fruit to very high-hanging fruit, and that was the discussion that we had with the minister. It was a very fruitful discussion, and I'm suspecting now that when we meet again, first of next week, we will have some really good tangible outcomes that we will be able to either lessen the degree or have really good assurance. I do want to ensure the public and you, as being the voice of the public, that if anybody needs health care, call 911. Don't be afraid to do that. We're going to be working with the communications department on how we can educate the public on when to call 911, but if you do, what that process looks like now, because we're in a different world. We were shared yesterday, for example, if you went on London Health Sciences Twitter feed, they're telling people when you go to the emergency department, pack a lunch, bring a bottle of water, and bring your headphones, because you could be there for 15 to 20 hours. We don't necessarily want to go there. We want to say that you will get health care, but understand what may happen when you go to the emergency department, because I want to ensure the public we're there, but this is all about making sure we have an ambulance available when you call it and when you need it for those life-threatening emergencies. The urgency ones, they may be able to wait, they may be in the queue. So I just want to make sure that all of the mayors, deputy mayors, and the general public watching, we are there, but the declaration was to make sure that we have resources available when you need it. And sorry for my outbreak before.
Go ahead, Mayor McDonald.
Thank you. Just 2 points. Thank you, Chief, for having the courage to declare the emergency, because as we look around the province, no one else has done it. So good on you to have the guts to do that, because it takes guts, as we all know. And then, again, I wanted that explanation because, you know, we look at our news feeds and the opposition is trying to turn this into a political advantage, and I don't want it to be that. That's why I'm glad it was a decision made at this level, that it wasn't political, particularly with Monday being what Monday is. So again, thank you to you and your team for having the guts. Thank you for this team for deciding that that was a good move in conjunction with the chief. I think it's important, and it's important that we as a group support all of you and get the message out. Like you said, it's not that the hospitals aren't doing the job, it's just a matter of volume and finding the way. And I hope the province appreciates how this was put forward. This was not for political reasons. This was just need, necessity, and well, need and necessity. What else do we call it? So again, thank you for answering my questions and putting the public, the information out to the public, the accurate information that's not fed by anything other than your own trying to make the community a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor McDonald. Deputy Mayor Borkman.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Mayor McDonald, for bringing this up. This was something, our council meeting was Monday night, so the biggest issue on our agenda was suddenly there, and we were tasked, the mayor and myself, to bring that to county council and to ask some of those questions to see what exactly had happened, how that decision was made, and where are we going now. So I want to thank you very much. I mean, we appreciate the work that you and your team have done. We appreciate that you've already reached out to upper level governments to move forward on it. One of the things that we see is what is happening, what appears to happen all the way here to London, is we are counting on ambulances to be in the parking lot to take over when an emergency department can't fulfill its duty. That's not anybody's fault. We're not saying that there's a blame there, but it is what's going on. And that is where we have to find that capacity. There has to be something that we can do, and we really hope that at the level you're working at, that is the number one thing we need to do. Where is that capacity going to come from? Because we can buy more ambulances. We can hire more paramedics. There's no more parking. And we're burning out the people that are there. They're coming to work in the morning, and if they end up picking somebody up and they got to stay at the hospital for 10 hours with them, what can they do? What are they? So our frontline workers are suffering probably the most coming down that trip. So we need to do something. We need to do it at that level. So I really appreciate the explanations and what you've shared with us, and we'll take that back to our residents. Thank you.
Mayor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and certainly thanks to Bruce. He knows I've had to call on him 3 times with my mother-in-law who's fell, and the situation is a multitude, I think, of problems. When you got to go, and someone else called me just yesterday and said they laid on the gurney for 14 hours before, because there was no room for them in the hospital. And I know with my mother-in-law in the one situation, she fell and sliced her head open, and we took her in around 6 o'clock or something, and at 2 a.m. in the morning, they come to me and said, she checked herself out. I said, well, they haven't only checked her for any concussion, like they never stitched her up or anything, and she just had it. And so we had to take her home. And I mean, she hit the kitchen table. She was a mess. And she just checked herself out, and she's 86, so she's no young chick to go through that, and it's happened 3 times now. So I think there's more than an ambulance problem. So in fact, I sent the Premier a text message on it. I was so upset, and lo and behold, the Premier called me about 2 minutes later. So we got to make sure the province is aware. I think we need more funding, and we need more staffing or whatever. We have a huge problem there, and it's going to take the whole group, and I appreciate the work of all the group. But they got to work together as a team and solve this. So, thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Bruce. I get pretty emotional too, and I'm more upset right now. I'm upset that we just saw the province come up with a $2.9 billion surplus, and there are only 2 things that every Canadian agrees on: good health care, good education. Everything else is muddy. He didn't even make an effort to put any of that money, our money, the taxpayers' money, towards something that we know has been in very big need. I guess on a simpler fact, I do have a lot of the EMS customers at the barbershop from Harrow, Essex, Kingsville, Leamington, and they consistently say that if we can just get somebody like a concierge that's there, we give them all the information, we leave, and that person, that group, and they all said the same thing, that there is an awful lot of EMS that are retired that don't want the stress of being in a car, don't want to be a stress of the call, but have no problem taking care of that. So that could be a part-time. We look at the data, we see where it's needed, bring those people back, help them out, because they're retiring very young and very healthy. But again, they don't want that level of stress, but would not mind being there for the patients. So my business brain always looks at where those weaknesses are, and I really think we can look out of it at a cheaper, easier, quicker level on that situation. So those are just my comments.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or certainly comments to the Chief? Yes, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Meloche.
Thank you, Warden. Through you, and actually directed to what you said, and I can only agree with you 100%, we've discussed this before. This is nothing new. And I think that's the biggest problem, is we've brought it to attention. This isn't anything new, but we're not seeing results. What we did this week, I think, is the step that hopefully somebody else is going to open their eyes and see what we're going through down here. And the fact that we can get a text message 2 minutes later says you got their attention. And hopefully that means we'll get something here, because all I see is, like you said, flu season, COVID season, a growing population, an aging population, and a hospital that's years away. So we need solutions now. We don't need promises for years in the future. We need this now, because we don't want to have another one of these anytime in the near future. So I commend you for what you did this weekend, and hopefully that means they're listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further questions or comments? Thank you, Chief. As they say, keep your chin up.